This is the 3-month update on my Walstad Betta Fish tank. Just for anyone who isn't familiar with the Walstad method, this tank is based on using cheap topsoil for the nutrient layer in the tank and then capping it with cheap sand or fine gravel. You then use fast grown stem plants for natural filtration to maintain safe and stable water parameters, and there's no need to use CO2 or liquid fertilizers, helping to keep things as cheap as possible. So starting with my Betta Fish, because this is actually Cooley's tank, and even though he is back in there now, I did have my other Betta Fish Stitch in here for a week this month. Stitch has some issues with glass surfing, so I wanted to try him in a totally different tank to see if it helped or not, but he did keep glass surfing in here, so I did switch the Betta Fish back into their usual tanks. Cooley settled into the other Betta Fish tank within minutes, and he ended up playing amongst the plants in that one too, so I really do think he likes playing with plants. So there really hasn't been much of an issue with moving Cooley between the two tanks, and he settled back in instantly. He does seem far more confident in this tank now, and he'll come over to the front glass pane whenever I'm close to it. And as much as I'd like to think it's because he's happy to see me, I'm pretty sure he just wants some food. I was a little worried by what looks like a little red patch on his tail, but after trying to get a bunch of photographs of it, I'm pretty sure it is just the way that his fins and tail layer into each other as he swims, and I don't think there's a problem. I've also noticed this little black spot on his head, and again I've tried to get a bunch of photographs and video of it, but I don't think it's hole in the head disease starting. I do just think it's a black scale. Moving forward, I will be paying particular attention to both of these to try and make sure I can get on top of any potential issues that may develop though. As usual, I've been feeding him fluval bug bites for his first meal of the day and NT Labs Nanotropical for his second meal. Initially, I had to hand feed Cooley because he was more than happy to just watch his food floating around on the surface until it'd sink, and then the shrimp in his tank would eat it and he wouldn't have any food. Thankfully, this has changed and he will take food from the surface without me putting it in front of him now, so I am more confident in just adding food to the tank and leaving it for him to eat in his own time. He's also starting to get used to eating bloodworm for his treat meal as well, but he still doesn't seem as bothered by it as my other Betta Fish, and I honestly do think that he just prefers the regular food over any of the frozen treat foods that I have. Moving forward though, I will still add bloodworm, some frozen Daphnia or some frozen Cyclops at least once a week just to mix his diet up a little bit. So moving on to the inverts in this tank, and there is 1 zebra snail, 3 Armano shrimp and a bunch of red cherry shrimp. Originally there were only 5 red cherry shrimp in here, but they quickly had babies and there's at least 2 generations of baby cherry shrimp in here now. Unlike some other Betta Fish, Cooley likes to float above the Sterigani repens and Eliocharis in this tank and just watch the shrimp grazing instead of trying to eat them. I actually uploaded a short that goes into more detail that I link in the video description and card, but it shows how close he'll get to a baby shrimp without striking at it and trying to eat. I am curious how large the cherry shrimp population in here will get though, because the red cherries settled in pretty much instantly and got down to business, and I'm pretty sure I saw a buried female a few days ago, so that'll be the 3rd generation in this tank. With there being so many cherry shrimp in this tank now, my Armano shrimp seem to prefer grazing on the algae and biofilm grown on the stem plants in the back of the tank. Here's a little clip of Stitch getting some bloodworm treats when he was in this tank a week ago, but as you can see, he let the last one sink, and the second it touches the floor, one of the Armano shrimp are on top of it. I'm still not supplementing the diet of the shrimp in this tank, but if my red cherry shrimp do keep breeding, then I will probably start to target feed the shrimp with an algae wafer every few days. The zebra nerite snail in the tank has just been keeping itself to itself and grazing on the algae and biofilm on the tank glass during the night and sleeping during the day. Anyway, moving on to the plants in the tank, and I'll have a full plant list in the video description, but some problems are starting to develop. Starting in the foreground with the Eliocharis Pasilia, and I know that this is yellowing, but in all honesty I personally don't really mind some yellowing hairgrass in my tank because I'm not using any CO2 in here or liquid fertilizer, so I'm happy with how it's performing. The Eliocharis is definitely grown in the tank and it's starting to spread out over the foreground and give that carpeting effect. Although the growth is slow, I rather have slow growth than these plants melting, so I am happy with how it's performing. Moving on to the midground of the tank, and I have Sterigani repens here, and it was having some problems last month, but they have definitely gotten worse. As you can see, there's a bunch of holes in the leaves of this particular plant, and it is only getting worse, and it is noticeably getting worse every 2 weeks or so. I would guess that this is a nutrient issue in the tank and that the roots of the Sterigani repens haven't been able to get through the gravel towards the nutrient layer of topsoil yet. Now I can't see the roots of the Sterigani repens, but in this shot you can see the roots of the Eliocharis Picilia at the foreground of the tank, and these haven't actually made it to the nutrient layer yet either. So I am guessing the same problem is happening with the Sterigani repens. I am hoping that over the coming months the roots of the Sterigani repens will hit the topsoil and the plant will pick up, but if it does melt I do have some backup plants. Basically it would be the trimmings from the Bacopa Compact or the Bacopa Caroliniana in my 12-gallon guppy tank that I just trim from this tank and move across. Although Bacopa can have a pretty decent maximum length, it does have a very slow growth rate compared to most other stem plants in the hobby, so you can easily trim this once every month or two and use it as a mid-ground plant. Fingers crossed that the Sterigani repens will hit the nutrient layer soon and pick up and be healthy though. Moving on to the background of the tank, and I'll start with the Ludwigia Mini Super Red, as this one is starting to have a few problems. It is a little difficult to see, but if you look at the leaves inside of the main clump, they are starting to develop small holes and that are a different colour of the other leaves on the plant. This particular plant was only added to this tank to test red plants with the Walstad method, as I have seen people say it's fine and I've seen other people say they should be avoided and will have problems. In all honesty, it's really not a huge issue if the Ludwigia in this tank fails, and I'll just replace it with some more Rotala. But this could be a similar issue to what I think's happening with the Sterigani repens, where the roots of the plant might not have made it into the nutrient layer in the tank yet. So hopefully over the coming weeks the roots will hit the nutrient layer and they will pick up. So moving on to the Rotala rotundifolia, and I have recently trimmed this plant down to give Cooley a little bit more swim space at the top back of the tank, but this has grown consistently at a fast pace. It's also starting to colour up really well since I upgraded the light on this tank. Moving on to the Rotala orange juice in this tank, and it's really not gaining much height, but it is healthy and it is grown, so I'm happy with it. One thing to note about Rotala orange juice compared to the regular Rotala rotundifolia is that the orange juice variant is listed as needing a moderate amount of CO2 for optimal growth. Considering that I'm not running any CO2 in this tank at all, I'm actually really happy with how the Rotala orange juice has grown, and I definitely prefer it there over the Limnophilia sessiliflora that I used to have in the back left of this tank. It has a more predictable growth pattern and it just doesn't take over the tank, so yeah, very happy with the change. Finally, we have the Salvinia floating plant, and I highly recommend some type of floating plant for any type of Walstad tank, as they are great for managing any excess nutrients. This plant just cracks on and grows consistently every single day with minimal issues, and I personally think it's the best plant for my personal needs, but I do have a video on my YouTube channel that I link to in the card and description that goes into more detail. So moving on to tank maintenance, and this is a pretty low maintenance tank in all honesty. One of the main tasks is keeping the plants in order, because the Salvinia floating plant grows at a very rapid pace and so does the Rotala rotundifolia. Outside of trimming them every week, I also do a water parameter test every Sunday just to see what's happening in the tank. Thankfully the water parameters are safe and stable, and I haven't really had to do anything to keep this tank safe for the Betta fish. That said, I am going to be doing a weekly partial water change moving forward, but this isn't actually to maintain the water parameters in the tank, it's more to deal with the particulate matter that's starting to float around consistently. I have definitely noticed an increase in the particulate matter floating in the tank since the Sterigani repens and Ludwigia started to form holes, so this is more to manage that than any problems with water parameters. Considering how heavily planted this tank actually is and how fast the Rotala rotundifolia and Salvinia grow, I am confident in the tank's ability to absorb any type of ammonia spike. Just to quickly touch on the actual setup that I'm using for this tank in case anyone wants to try it. The aquarium and lid is from an AquaL Shrimp Set 30 tank set, and I published a dedicated video on it this month that I link to in the card and description. I upgraded the light from the stock light that comes with that set to a Haiga 597, and I'm really happy with how it's performing so far. I upgraded the stock heater to a Fluval T50, as I use the Fluval T series heaters in all of my tanks and I've never had a problem with them. The airstone and pump is just a cheap USB airstone setup that you can get on Amazon for around $10. There's a few options you can use for the substrate, and I don't use sand in this tank, I just use fine gravel, and I think it's the Petex Roman fine gravel I think it's called. And the actual nutrient layer is just Westland topsoil, which is a British brand. I don't think you can get it anywhere else, but any general topsoil should be fine for this type of aquarium. Anyway, that brings the actual update on this tank to an end. Thanks for watching and have a good day, but here's 1 minute of Cooley swimming around his tank just to show you the actual stuff he gets up to when I'm not around.